I think a big one is always talking about where does the phone live at night? There was a study, I think it was Bank of America, a number of years ago, 35% of people were saying that they were reaching for their phones in the morning before they reached for their spouse. And I would have to say, again, in a post-COVID world, I would believe that statistic is higher, but it's because we keep our phones in our room. I have told so many of my clients, I'm like, go old school. Alarm clocks are amazing. You just push a button, it still wakes you up. It's all of the good things. And it forces the phone to not become the last thing that you look at night and the first thing you look at in the morning.
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how much parenthood could change a marriage. If flirting, laughing, and having fun together feels like a thing of the past, then I'm here to teach you that marriage doesn't have to feel so hard with your parents, and your marriage can thrive even when you're in the season of raising kids. Whether you're in a good place in your marriage and you just want to continue growing together, or you're wondering if you even like your spouse anymore, this podcast has something for you. Join me here each week as we dive into what it takes to help your marriage grow, and maybe even do a 180. You'll learn ways to handle conflict better, bring that spark back into your relationship, as well as learn how to improve other areas of your life from my lovely guest experts. Are you ready for the next stage of your life and marriage? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. Ladies, you are in for a treat today because we have Alisa DiLorenzo. Did I say your last name right?
You did great.
Amazing. If you don't know her, she is big out there, okay? She has a podcast that you likely have listened to, and she probably has reels that you've watched over and over again. If you are in the realm of like, I really need to work on my marriage, I really need to make this succeed and learn how to have a healthy relationship. And so I'm so thrilled to have you here, Lisa. We're going to be talking about something that has plagued all modern relationships, whether you're married or not. We're talking about our phones, okay? We're going to go there. We're going to talk about how that has changed the dynamic of how relationships work, and maybe even some benefits, definitely some drawbacks and things that we need to be mindful of. But before we get into that, Alisa, can you please share with the listeners where you live, how old your kids are, how long you've been married, and tell us how you got into this world of working with people and helping them save their marriages.
Well, first things first, I live in Southwest Florida, between Naples and Fort Myers in a little town called Estero. Have been here for the last year and a half, and I have 2 young adult children. They're about to turn 23 and 20. We've got all the birthdays coming up here in the next 6 weeks. So we like to cram it in. As of this recording, they are crammed in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So we do a lot between Thanksgiving and Christmas Day. I have been married to my incredible husband, Tony, for 29 years. So this topic of phones and whatnot, we have seen the full gamut from landlines, and cordless phones to everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket. But with that, my own journey into being in this world of marriage and speaking into marriages really came about because around year 11, Tony and I were pretty dysfunctional. We had 2 young children. The kids were 2 and 5 at the time. We were essentially a sexless marriage. We were doing a really good job of living as roommates. Maybe not so good. We were actually just living as roommates and handling the logistics of our lives. And we were getting ready to lead a small group at our church. And Tony said, I think we should talk about sex in our small group. And he had that thought because he felt like the church wasn't talking about sex enough. And with that, I challenged him, like, find me a book. He found a book. We ended up doing the study, but as part of the study, we also did a 60-day sex challenge at the same time. He really felt the need for us to move out of the place of stagnation, and I came on board, and there's a whole story behind that, which we might end up talking about or talk about another day, but it was coming out of that experience and being asked to speak at a marriage conference that really launched what Tony and I do. And because people started asking what's next, right? And that launched our books, that launched the podcast. And about 13 years ago, it also launched me into marriage coaching.
Amazing. Okay, so for those who don't know, what's the name of your podcast? What are the names of your books? Because as soon as you tell them, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, starstruck.
Yes, the name of the podcast is the One Extraordinary Marriage Show. And like I said, we've been podcasting since January of 2010. So there's almost 900 episodes of marriage content. It's always Tony and I having a conversation. The books that we've written, number of bestsellers, including The Six Pillars of Intimacy, The Secret to an Extraordinary Marriage. And that was released, ironically, in the middle of COVID, November of 2021. And that has been the book. That's our cornerstone book that really just allows couples to look at their marriage holistically and look at each one of the pillars of intimacy to be able to say, hey, where are we strong and where do we have cracks? And what can we do to strengthen the areas of weakness so that everything is strong?
Yes, and what a great time to release a book too, because I feel like with COVID, people were all shacked up with nowhere to go, no one to hang out with, and you're either going to like figure things out or realize, wow, I really don't like you. We are spending way too much time together. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that really, as we're talking about this topic of phones, I think COVID actually kind of accelerated a lot of the challenges around phones because we were in our homes. We were, seeking entertainment and news and all of the things, and everybody had a device, whether it was you and your spouse having to be on Zoom all the time for work, or your kids being behind an iPad or whatnot because they were also doing online school. Like we were all kind of forced to be on our devices just to navigate daily life. And then as kind of the world reopened, I'm not really sure that we pulled back from our devices in the way that we were pre-COVID.
Yeah, actually, I love that you brought that up because I didn't even think about that shift and how much that time really affected how we utilize our devices. I remember when COVID first hit, I was like, oh, well, thank goodness Target's now doing drive up, right? That was such a treat. But now it's like Amazon has like not even just doubled down, like whatever, exponentially went in on distribution centers, and now we can get stuff right away. And so we're doing a lot more online shopping. We're doing grocery deliveries more often. And it's like people are just getting used to doing everything that they need on their phones. So let's talk about this because it's hard to tell unless you're hovering over your partner to see what they're doing on their phone. Are they texting? Are they working? Are they shopping? Are they doom scrolling? Are they playing a game? Like, let's talk about how phones have affected your marriage and what you've noticed throughout the time. Like, yeah, landlines. Okay, like obviously, I don't think that's an unhealthy thing. I remember doing party lines with my girlfriends, and that was such a great time. I remember having AOL and having to wait for people to get off the phone and doing the dial-up thing, right? We had patience back then. But now it's like everything's on demand. So how have you noticed that shift in your marriage? Because obviously you've been married for much longer than I have. Mm-hmm. Congratulations. I know you guys have been through it and you guys have made it through. So yeah, what do you have to share, like your observations and lessons learned?
Yeah, I mean, personally, again, Tony and I got married in 96. I mean, I remember big brick cell phones, people carried around their mobile phones. I remember, having to, type every letter because you didn't have the keypad, it was like
the T9.
Oh my gosh, all the things. And, so at that point in time, having a mobile phone was just more convenience. It was like, oh, if you're out, I'm going to call you to get milk or something like that. Cause I'm definitely not going to try and type, please get milk at the grocery store. I could have gone to the grocery store at that point in time by myself. But as the technology has advanced, they have become substitute in some marriages and relationships, even substitute partners. I was seeing a statistic that said that 71% of people report that they actually spend more time engaging with their phone than their partner on any given day. And you think about that, that's almost 3 out of 4. And you start thinking about your own usage. And I definitely know I'm guilty of this. I am in our family, I am the passenger princess. So when we go somewhere, I hop in the car. And sometimes I'm super helpful. And I'm like, we did a cross-country road trip last year, and I'm the one finding the hotels, and I'm looking for detours, and I'm doing all that kind of stuff. And I'm also the one on Instagram, on Facebook, on X, seeing what's going on, checking sports scores for my husband, doing all this kind of stuff. But I can easily drift into this place where, I've been intentional, like, I'm just going to look this up. And then I move into really impacting my marriage by tuning out and disconnecting from Tony, because, we all follow the shiny object of whatever the headline is. And before you know it, it's been 20 minutes that you're on your phone, and your spouse is like, hey, what, hello, what about me?
Yeah. I mean, that's the nature of how businesses operate now, right? Before, I feel like it was the magazine covers trying to grab your attention, but it's easy to just walk by unless there's like a scandalous picture that you see, right? And then there's the news. They always have headlines. Like they're always trying to bait you into grabbing your attention. But now it's like everywhere. It's not just billboards that you have to physically be in proximity with, but now it's like all over your phone. And so, yeah, I love your point where it's like, yeah, you might start off having good intentions, like, oh, I gotta add this to our grocery list, which is virtual because we share it with our partners, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got a notification, or let me just check Instagram real quick. Let's just see what's going on here. And next thing you know, it's like, I don't know, for some people it could be 20 minutes, some people could be a couple hours. And it's like, oh shit, what did I just waste my time on? Then you have that guilt.
Well, and you have two competing emotions right there, because you'll have the guilt. And this goes both ways. Like, I'm not going to say it's all women who are,
Oh, no, there's definitely men that do
this. It goes both ways. Sports and news generally tend to grab men's attention, Instagram, social media, women.
Yes.
But you have the guilt, and then you're also dealing with your spouse's feelings of rejection. You have two really strong emotions that don't necessarily create connection, but they do create a whole lot of friction. And this has been something that Tony and I have had to navigate. I mean, for a period of time, a couple of years ago, I would realize that as I was trying to talk to him, I would say something and there'd be no response. I think probably everybody listening to this podcast has heard that, right? You listen, there's no response. And so you try, maybe you say it a little louder or with a little more inflection. And I finally, a couple of years ago, I told Tony at the beginning of the year, I'm like, I'm tired of this. If I start talking to you and you don't respond, I'm just going to go quiet and stare at you until you respond. And he's like, all right. And you hear something like that and you don't think anything of it. And it wasn't out of a place of anger. It was just, hey, I'm not going to keep using all my words.
Right.
If you're not listening. And what was really interesting is that it was the silence that got him to engage. So it was like, you could almost hear the background noise, but when I went quiet, then he would look up from whatever he's doing. He's like, hey, what were you saying? And then I had the opportunity at that point in time, hey, is this a good time for us to talk about this? Is this a good time to have a conversation? Instead of me just assuming that because I'm his wife, I'm the most important thing in that moment. Because he, legitimately, we work together. He might be doing something for our business. He might just be on, ESPN. He might be checking the news. Like, I don't know what he's doing. But we assume our spouses are just scrolling instead of asking the question, hey, is this a good time? Right. And that's where I think part of the challenge too is with the phones is because we can't see. It's not like there's a giant screen that says your spouse is, they're on the work app right now or they're responding to their boss. We don't know. And we just assume. And so we start talking.
Yeah. And I mean, people get to relax, right? Like we get to relax. And most times that means not being productive. And we can easily jump to conclusions and judgment, right? We're like, hey, you're not even doing anything what we think is important. So why aren't you listening to me share with you whatever it is that I want to share? And I think this applies to conflict as well, right? If when you have something to bring up, you can't just assume that when you're ready to talk about it, they're available to hear it.
Right, because we have no idea what their mental state is. We have no idea what they're even processing at that point in time. And we're so quick when we see people with a phone to just start a conversation. Instead of taking one extra step and saying, hey, I've got something I want to talk about. Is now a good time?
Yeah.
I actually think that would eliminate a lot of feelings of rejection and a lot of feelings, escalated conflict if we could just implement, hey, I've got something I want to talk about. Is this a good time? And wait to get a response. Don't assume no response is the yes response because they might still be distracted.
Yes.
And you're not going to get the outcome that you want.
No. And I think this all comes down to applying consent and respect, right? Like that's an example of how you can do that. You can't just like dump on someone because you feel like talking about it. What if they've had a really shitty day And you basically just walked into a conversation that's not going to go the way you hoped it would go because you didn't check in with them to see if A, it's a good time for them to listen, B, if they're willing and able to have this conversation with you. So let's start with the positive first. What are some positive benefits that you've noticed come out of having smartphones? Because it's really the smartphones, right? It's not the flip phones, like none of that. Like that's old school, right?
Yes. Yeah, the smartphones, a lot of the things, like you mentioned one earlier, right? I mean, we can do the shared grocery list. So nobody's, missing out on, oh my gosh, you didn't get milk. What was on the list? Look at the list. I think location, and like I said, I'm a parent of 2 children that were recently teenagers. Our entire family was on Life 360. And we intentionally, for our children, I told them, I said, you will always be able to find us in the same way that we're always able to find you. And I think that's been a benefit. I do see in some relationships that can actually be, detrimental because they're tracking one another. When there's been a breach of trust, that it can escalate. But in our family, that's been really positive. Being able to send voice memos. I actually think this is like an underutilized tool for a lot of folks because we're so quick to just type out a text message, and yet you don't get inflection in text that you can get with a voice memo or, using like WhatsApp or Voxer or those types of apps. Because when you can share with somebody your inflection, the communication is heightened. And this as a marriage professional, a lot gets lost.
Like you lose half of the context. If not more.
And I think the fact that, all of the apps you mentioned, Amazon, some of these things do make us more efficient. Theoretically, so we'd have more time for our relationships. However, I think because of what we're talking about today and how phones have kind of integrated, sometimes that's not the case. But all of the tools for efficiency for, shared calendars, things like that, I think are all super beneficial because now we're not overbooking. We can actually see, like Tony and I have a shared calendar. So we book on that and we never, I don't have to ask him. I don't have to make the extra time. I just look and I'm like, okay, when he's free, I'm going to book something for the 2 of us because I can. And then just, the calendar invites and that type of thing.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, definitely gives us an opportunity to explore different ways to like improve our sense of partnership, right? You had mentioned, like you can add things to your grocery list, but also in the same vein, you can also go to the grocery store if you're out and you happen to have some time. Like it doesn't have to fall on just one single person. It's just who can do this the most easily, right? But also one thing I love about having smartphones is it's also a great way to connect, right? To share in humor. Humor is really big in my relationship. I'm a naturally like pretty goofy person. And so I love to share anything that makes me laugh or like create some kind of inside joke with my husband. And so like by the end of the day, we will have shared probably at least 10 things to like laugh about together, be like, hey, did you see that? And so I think that social media isn't all negative, right? But it does come down to having boundaries with yourself. So, and I know that's like a really big thing when it comes to making sure that our devices aren't hurting our relationship. So what boundaries have you found to be really helpful to have in your marriage or even your clients' marriages when it comes to the phone?
So I think a big one is always talking about where does the phone live at night? There was a study, I think it was Bank of America, a number of years ago, one of the first episodes that Tony and I ever did on phones that talked about the fact that I think at that point in time, and this was probably 8 years ago, 35% of people were saying that they were reaching for their phones in the morning before they reached for their spouse. And I would have to say, again, in a post-COVID world, I would believe that the statistic is higher, but it's because we keep our phones in our room. I tell, like Tony and I don't have our phones in our bedroom. I have told so many of my clients, I'm like, go old school. Alarm clocks are amazing. You just push a button, it still wakes you up. It's all of the good things. And it forces the phone to not become the last thing that you look at night and the first thing you look at in the morning. And like I have teenagers, we've done the teenager thing. We can put our phones in our bathroom. And if somebody needs to get in touch with us, because we've got, the ensuite bathroom, our kids can still reach us, but I'm not looking at the phone Tony gets my attention at the end of the day, or, first thing in the morning where we're just like waking up and there's nothing to grab. Additionally, a lot of my coaching clients, we've done so far and years ago we did this, we had a kitchen safe that was set on our timer. And so we would have these phone-free zones and phone-free nights. And we would put them in there, and clearly, and again, when we have teenage kids, there was always one phone that like stayed out just in case there was an emergency. But all the other phones would go in, and, maybe you set it for 30 minutes, but it's 30 minutes where nobody's going to be on a phone. I tell my clients, I'm like, don't go cold turkey. Don't say you're going to do this every night. Everybody will twitch and it'll be awful. But start with 15 or 30 minutes and find other things to do. Like pull out the games again, go for a walk, sit in your backyard, have a glass of wine and a conversation, right? Whatever that might be. But we actually have to, in this day and age where people carry their phones around, I've heard it referred to sometimes as an adult pacifier.
That's a good one.
Because we soothe, we entertain, we do all of the things, and we always have it. And if you look at little ones with a pacifier, especially when they're in those stages, they've got their pacifier with them all the time. And so we have to train ourselves not to have it and not to have accessibility, and to create that space where our partners or our spouses get to see our eyes, get to hear our voice, and aren't looking at the back of an iPhone, Google, whatever it is, but they actually get to see us and that engagement.
Yeah. And another like side benefit to not having the phone in your room, which I don't do, which I'm like now kind of like, I wonder what would happen if I did that. But it helps your sleep hygiene. And we all know how important sleep is to your marriage.
Oh, yes.
Right? Well, when you're not well rested, you're going to argue more, be more petty, less compassionate, less patient, less loving, less wanting to connect, less everything that you want to be.
All of it. And I am 51. I am perimenopausal. Sleep is a very, very precious commodity in my life. And so that's another reason why we just don't have the phones in, unless, again, when the kids were at home, when they were high schoolers, all of that. Yes, there was always one phone in close proximity because teenagers, enough said. But away from that, I need every precious minute of sleep. And I don't need that blue light messing with my circadian rhythm. I don't need, for a lot of people, being on social media or looking at the news can be anxiety inducing. And I will tell you folks, you do not need that the last thing before you go to bed or the first thing when you wake. All of the news, all of the stuff will still be there, along with the really cute reels with like dogs and puppies and baby goats. And like you can still find those. And I love that the two of you use that for humor and use that as a bonding. It will all still be there.
Yes.
20 minutes after you get up. But that 20 minutes that the two of you could start your day in connection or end the day in connection changes so much for marriages, because now it's saying you're important. And in a society where like the phone and people, like the statistics around phone use are so crazy, we need more opportunities to tell our partners that they are the most important thing. Yeah. Because when they see the phone, the message is, my phone is the most important thing.
Yes. A really big question is like, hey, if I were a fly on the wall, would I be able to tell that your marriage is important to you just based on what I can see? And I can't tell you, and I'm sure you won't be surprised by this, but I can't tell you how many couples have told me how they end their night, where they're both backs facing each other. They're on their own side of the bed, staring at their phone. Maybe they're like on their side, and then they fall asleep. And it's like, so you share a bed, but that's it. You like physically share a bed, but there's no sense of like, hey, good night. There's no pillow talk. There's none of that. And I'm like, that breaks my heart, because that's a missed opportunity for connection every single day.
Well, and I don't know if you hear this from your clients, but a lot of what I hear is this idea of, well, I need to decompress.
Sure, that's fair.
I need this time. And I've told people, I'm like, I am not telling you you can't decompress. I actually think it's good to have downtime, whether you are, a stay-at-home mom, you're working, whatever your day-to-day looks like, we all need downtime. My encouragement is, don't make that be the last 30 minutes.
Yeah.
of your entire day when, like you said, backs to each other. I mean, there's a reason that, that image, everybody knows that image as you described it, because it's reality for so many couples. And we're not stepping into this place of saying, what does it look like if we do our marriage different?
Yes. But also, is doing that during your downtime actually fulfilling the need that you are trying to fulfill? That's a big question that a lot of people haven't asked themselves. Like, do you actually feel more relaxed, and are you getting out of it what you want? I've had to personally turn off all my notifications for those kinds of apps. So like, I don't get Instagram notifications. I don't get Facebook notifications, because I noticed years ago, like it kept pulling my attention to the point where I was like checking my phone every, I don't even know, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And I'm like, what is this? Like you're controlling me, and I'm allowing it.
That right there. I'm allowing.
Yeah.
My life, my emotions, my time to be controlled by, like, I don't know, 3.5 by 6 inch device. I'm looking around trying to gauge. I'm like, I don't even know what size you are. And instead of taking it back, taking our lives back and saying, I'm empowered to make decisions about how I use this device. And I also am empowered to demonstrate that my marriage is the most important relationship. So how do I do both of those things? How do we do both of those things? Because it's very much a conversation, and very likely multiple conversations between a husband and a wife, right? How are we going to use phones in our lives?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember years ago, I had a coaching client, and he said, when I walk in the door, at the end of the day, there is nothing that my company needs me for. I was a business owner. He goes, so my phone goes in a drawer, and I will pick it back up again in the morning when I am getting ready to go to work. He goes, but when I walk in the door, my wife and my children need to know that they have my undivided attention. And I had flashbacks to growing up. And when I was born in 74, nobody, like growing up in the 80s, cell phones didn't exist, right? Smartphones were a glimmer of imagination somewhere. Mom and dad came home at the end of the day, and we did things as maybe we were watching TV, yes. But we played games. We did things together, and because there was nothing else, we were forced to interact with one another.
Everyone was present.
Everyone was present. And now you can literally sit. I mean, you see this when you go out to dinner. You can see this, if you are that fly on the wall and zooming in on, you can literally have a family of 4 and everybody's on a device at the same time, and it's silent.
It's so sad. So sad. And it does take effort to do this. We're not trying to oversimplify this and be like, shame on you. Like, we get it. We've fallen into the addiction. Yes. It truly is an addiction. And so what really helps is having that conversation that Alisa said, right? Getting aligned with, okay, what's our stance on how we utilize the phone so it doesn't damage our relationships, but we can use it as a tool that could benefit us all, because we're not living in the Stone Age where like we could just deny that we quote unquote need these things, right? They have helped us in many ways, but it's also hindering us in many ways. So how can we reduce the hindrances and only use it as a positive tool for our family? So that looks like no devices at dinner time for me, right? So if my husband's on his phone, I'm like, hey, can you be here with us? And most times he's doing something for work, and I'm like, okay, like, is it going to be done soon? Like, we would like to talk to you. Because it is really distracting when everybody else is talking. You see this one person on their phone.
Right.
It's like, what's so important that you can't be here with us mentally, emotionally, not just physically, right? But yeah, I think that all matters so much to how your family dynamics work, how it feels to be a part of the family. And plus, we all know that our kids are looking at us, right? Yeah. They pay way more attention to the things that we do than what we say, unfortunately, especially in the teen years. Like, they really don't care what you have to say at that point. You've lost them, okay? I'm sorry to burst your bubble if you don't have teens yet, but that's just what it is. They look to their peers more than to their parents at this point. And that's a natural part of their journey. We did the same thing. Mm-hmm. But if all they see with them growing up is your eyes glued to the phone, like it's a permanent appendage of you now, they're going to be like, oh, this is normal. This is just what we do. This is how our family is. then it's like, oh, wait, this is not aligned to our family values. So why are we still doing so yeah, it sucks because we have to be like the adults and really take a look in the mirror and be like, am I embodying the values that I want to teach my kids? If the answer is no, then are you willing to deal with the consequences of that, right?
Absolutely. And I think, Michelle, you highlighted a very important thing is what are our family values?
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I would encourage couples to spend some time on that. Go to Google and ask for a list of values and see which ones resonate with the two of you individually and as a couple. And then it makes it really easy to come back to, if one of your values is connection. Okay, well, then you're looking at the phone use. Does the amount of time, and, for better or for worse, our phones can now tell us exactly how much time we're spending on them. But when you see that number at the end of the week, does that line up with a family value of connection? And I can't answer that, Michelle. You can't answer that for each family. It's going to be different for every family, but that becomes a metric that we can bring back to the emotional side and say, do those two things work? And if they don't, what am I going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
And do I want to do something about it?
Yes.
Because sometimes the answer is, I don't know if I want to give this up.
Uh-huh. I know that I can get addicted to certain things. And so for me, I have an Android. I know I'm like one of very few in the United States, but I have an Android. Okay. I don't have an iPhone.
You're fine.
But there's a digital well-being feature on the phone. So I can set a time, mine is 10 o'clock, where my phone will go gray. So I have a physical reminder like, hey, is what you're doing right now what you would like to be doing?
I love that.
Is this how you want to spend your time? Because I need those cues because I can so easily get sucked in, right? Back to me not having notifications on. Right. I know myself. I know I don't want to tread there. I know I'm going to fall into it and have a hard time getting out. And I've noticed that when I'm overstimulated or really stressed out, I numb out on my phone. I'll play mindless games. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, wait, what am I trying to avoid right now? What am I procrastinating about? But that's me. Like, I've just come to learn that about myself. And so I think a lot of this is just like, yeah, use those metrics that they're showing you. Are you okay with that? We're not judging you. We understand how you can end up in that position. But the question is, are you okay with that? Are you going to regret anything? Is it doing what you want it to do for your mental and emotional well-being? Because I know for my kids, when they're on screens too long, they get really dysregulated and they start having a lot more outbursts and having a harder time managing their emotions, which us moms and dads, we don't want to deal with that more than we need to.
This is for all of us.
Yeah.
And I think that brings up a really good point is that, phone usage in our families doesn't just impact the one whose eyes are looking at the screen, right? You're talking about, what does this look like with children and them being dysregulated? What does it look like if we're dysregulated and our spouses are having to deal with us because we've stayed up and scrolling and, every scroll sends a signal, right? Mm-hmm. Is it something that is building our family because, I'm transferring money into a bank account for the trip that we're going on or whatever it might be? Or is it saying, hey, you know what? I would much rather be checked out or playing a game on my phone or avoiding something. Like we get to choose what the signal is. Mm-hmm. And even how we communicate what we're doing on our phone. It's so much easier, like you were saying, with your husband, if he says, hey, I'm doing this, one last thing before we eat for work and I need 5 more minutes, that gift of communication means you can just kind of process, okay, dinner's going to be in 5 minutes, but I will have his full attention. We will be able to have conversations at the table instead of just being like, yeah, I'm on it. And hello.
Yep.
Hello, right?
Assumptions galore. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I know everyone's listening to this and they're dying to know this part from us, right? What if your spouse has an addiction? Mm-hmm. And you have been able to reel in your own usage, but you're noticing that your spouse is having a hard time and you're like, how do I talk about this with him? How do I bring this up so that he doesn't get defensive or we don't get into a massive fight about this? I miss him. I just want him back.
One, I think the first thing is recognizing that phone addiction is a real thing. It's so easy for us to just be like, I'm just on my phone. No, phone addiction, like the phones were created to suck us in, because the more time that we spend on them, the less time we spend doing, especially on, some of these apps, the less time that we spend doing the stuff that actually matters. And, I think a big part of it is approaching things from a we approach. How do we want to do this? And I actually, with my coaching clients, especially if I know they have children, I really lean in heavily to what do we want to model for our children? What is the environment? Because it can be like between a husband and a wife, sometimes it can be really hard. You feel like you're telling, in this case, your husband might feel like you're telling him what to do. But when it comes back to, honey, I want to talk about how we are modeling phone usage to our kids. How much time do we think they should be on? And now it's all about, what are we, coming back to your value point, what do we value in terms of connection? And how do we want to model that? Do you think we should have, a phone-free zone? Maybe it is the dining room table, right? Where it's just like, nah, like collectively, doesn't matter if they're teenagers. It doesn't matter if, Susie down the street needs help with her homework, whatever it is, we're just going to make this half an hour that we're all at the table. You, me, the kids, zone free or phone free. And then you might also have those phone free nights, honey, and start small. I think, the tendency is to say, well, I don't want the phone ever, or, or like really big, right? Like you can't have the phone any night between 7 and 9 when the kids are up. And again, our human nature is to rebel against things that we're told we can't do. So when it becomes part of a game plan, hey, what do we like? Could we pick one night a week where we spend an hour with the kids and nobody's got any phones and it's game time, or we do a craft together, or whatever, play sports, whatever is appropriate for your family? Can we just do it 1 hour a week? Let's just try it for a month. Like
it's like a challenge, right?
Yeah. Let's see what happens if we gave 4 hours over the course of a month, phone free. And when you say that, and there's, I don't know, like 640, I think, hours in a month, something like that. Yeah, I know how many hours are in a week. I don't know how that multiplies times 4.
Yeah.
But 4 hours is very small. And again, then we make that feel like a very small number, and it can be much easier to get on board than to say one night a week, which feels big.
Yeah, absolutely. And aside from that, because that's a really strong point to lead with, right? Because obviously we want the best for our kids, and there's a lot of things that we're willing to do to ourselves because we're going to deal with the consequences that we are not willing for our kids to deal with because we want better for them, right? We're almost like okay with self-sacrificing. Another thing is, I think we need to kind of double down on what is the impact that this is having on us. If you're noticing that your partner has an addiction to their phone, okay, what's the impact to your relationship that you're noticing, right? And a lot of couples, when they really haven't learned how to communicate in an effective and healthy way because they weren't modeled, hello, me, right? Your natural inclination is to just point out the obvious, like, you're always on your phone. Is like, I feel like you're married to your phone now. Why aren't you paying attention to me? Okay, pause. I feel stressed just saying that. But that's not effective. Right. Why? Because you are already putting him in the position of, you are wrong and I am right. I am better than you and you're worse than me. You are failing me as a husband. You are failing as a partner. You're failing as a father. That's setting the conversation up for him to shut down or pull something out to criticize you about. So pause. Let that run through your head, because you can't stop that, right? Just let it run through, feel your feelings, and then think about, what do I want instead? What is it that I'm needing that I'm not getting? I know these are tough questions to ask if you're not used to it, but I promise you, doing this work of processing your thoughts and your feelings is going to yield a much more productive conversation. So what does this look like? Hey, I really miss hanging out with you. I feel like we're so busy nowadays, or we're on our phones, again, using that we language, not making it seem like it's just a him problem. It'd be really fun to bring back game night. What do you think about that? Right? And you could just start there and be like, you know what? I really enjoyed having everyone's full attention during game night. It was so nice that none of us were on our phones. We could just enjoy each other's company. And I felt like we were all like calmer and we feel like more of a family unit. And that could be used as a segue to be like, I've been noticing or wondering, what would it be like if we all just like vowed to use our phones less? Like, I wonder what would happen. I wonder if it would benefit our family somehow. Like, that could be a great segue. Mm-hmm. We don't always have to make these like hard conversations so heavy and serious.
Well, and you hit on two things as you were explaining that. One is the we language. And anytime that we can use we, it helps to keep people from going on the defensive.
Yes.
And the always and never. We actually did a podcast episode years ago on always and never, because the minute you throw out an always or a never, your spouse has stopped listening to everything that you're talking about, because they are going through their memory, database and going, okay, when is the one time that was not true? So that
they're going to poke holes.
They're going to poke holes in it. And so, and what I really like about the way you describe that is there's the curiosity factor, right? You're not mandating, you're not demanding, you're not, this is now, the law in our household. When we approach our spouses from a place of curiosity, now they can be curious with us. Well, I don't know.
Yes.
Right? Because they don't feel attacked. It's just, I wonder how the kids would respond if we did that. I wonder what we could do on a night if we weren't, just sitting around on our phones. What is something we haven't done in a while that you've been missing? That, maybe there's a new restaurant, or, go for a walk. So that curiosity aspect is so key. And it is something that gets lost with the phones, because we can search anything we want on our phones instead of staying curious about who the person is that we're married to.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I've even started hearing about people using ChatGPT to like figure out how to talk to their spouse.
Oh yeah.
Which I think is good and bad, because I think that it's important to lead with authenticity, right? I think having guidelines on how to frame what you're going to say is good, but also like know where your stance is, know what you feel, know what you're thinking. Don't just go with the canned responses, because that could come off very robotic almost. And like, I don't know, I'm sure that could be a whole entire episode about how.
And it can be like, Tony and I did an episode on using AI. And it is something, I'll just, drop this in here. Be very careful, for those of you listening, because AI, while, I've listened to a lot of founders of different AI models talk about this, they will often say, our model will not lead you down the road to divorce or anything like that. I know enough about how people respond being a marriage coach for 13 years that I was able to, just in a test, get an AI model to start insinuating that divorce or ending my marriage would be a good next step after about 3 back and forth queries.
Oh,
so I am always really cautious. I've got coaching clients that have used AI, like we talk about it. We talk about how to ask really good questions, how to even, if you're doing that and asking communication, like ask the model to even ask you how your spouse might respond, so that you're putting in both inputs and not just your side.
Yes. Ooh, I like that. Yeah, because it can be really one-sided. If you're the only one using it, then it's not going to give you what you could come up with just based off of your past experiences. And I think you need to balance that perspective for sure. Okay, I love this conversation. I'm sure we can go on and on about this, because it's been such a big change in just how we navigate our relationship. It's like that third wheel almost that has gotten introduced into our lives. And I think it's really important at the end of this to just be intentional. I think that's our like main takeaway for you, is be intentional about how you're using this. We're not saying don't use it. There's definitely benefits that can help your partnership, that can help your connection. I mean, shoot, you could use your digital calendar to schedule sex if that's where you're at, right? There are definitely ways that you can use this to help your marriage.
Yes.
But there's also the other side, right? So be mindful, Okay, so you had mentioned your book, and I happen to know you have a quiz. Can you tell the listeners about your intimacy assessment?
Yes. So coming from this place of creating the 6 pillars of intimacy, one of the things that we realized as we began to introduce this to our audience is that a lot of people, one, it's a new concept, and 2, a lot of people are, like, how do we assess where we're at? And so we do make a free quiz available. It is one of those things where going through the questions, first and foremost, just gets you thinking about your marriage as a whole, right? It's so easy to be like, we just can't get along, or this isn't good. Instead of going, wait a minute, we might actually have some strengths. Maybe we're strong in our recreational intimacy, or, strong in financial intimacy, but our physical intimacy is a little bit lower. And so the assessment actually helps individuals, because you can take it individually, but to be able to look at that and say, how are we doing actually? And the other thing is you can take it multiple times. So it's, spend some time being intentional. The word that you just used, it's one of our favorite phrases, be intentional and take action. When you're intentional about your marriage, how can you move that needle? And so, that's why we do have the 6 pillars of intimacy assessment. And I believe I gave you the link so that.
Yes, I will put that in the show notes so you guys can go check that out, because I think it is really important to know exactly what area you want to grow in as a couple. Because just because your marriage feels hard doesn't mean you need to scrap everything. Okay. So let's just take what works, carry that forward, continue doing those things, and whatever's not working right now, work on that, right? And take baby steps. Well, thank you so much, Alisa, for being a guest on the show. I love this conversation. I'm sure I'll have you back here to talk about something else. I always love connecting with other marriage professionals to talk about this stuff, because sometimes what I say may not resonate with someone, but someone else could say something and it completely changes their life. So I'm so glad to have had a different perspective on this show to support the listeners out there and having a healthy marriage that they can then enjoy and model to their kids, so they can be proud and relieved that they are doing the work to set their kids up for success in the future. For those who are wanting to connect with you, where's the best place to find you?
So you can start and direct everybody to oneextraordinarymarriage.com, and that is one spelled O-N-E, and everything is there from social to, all of our podcasts are there, but you can find the podcast wherever you're listening to this. We are on all the podcast players, but everything is under One Extraordinary Marriage.
Amazing. Thank you again. Listeners, if you love this episode and you want to connect with her, go connect with her. Let her know you found her from this show. And if you know someone that could benefit from listening to this episode, which who couldn't, please share this with them. Better yet, share this on your Instagram stories and tag us so we can give you a shout out. And if you love this show, I am so grateful that you're here. Please leave a rating and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. That's what helps the show grow. And secretly, I love reading them, because it just makes my heart so full knowing that I've helped someone, and to know who's listening, because really, I don't know who I'm talking to right now. So anyway, that's all we have for you today. I hope that you're taking away a lot. Feel free to revisit this episode, because I know sometimes I have to check myself and be like, ooh, I've fallen off the bandwagon with the phone usage, and I need to remind myself what I tell my clients. So no judgment there. This is always here for you. And I will catch you back here on the next episode. Bye.
That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please send me a message over on Instagram at Michelle Perta Coaching to let me know what you loved most about it. Hearing from my listeners is my absolute favorite. And if you've been loving this podcast, please leave a rating and review. This will help people like you find the show and get the help they need. Catch you here on the next episode. Bye.